The general elections in Kenya are coming up, and obviously you'll be electing some people for some political seats in the government. But do you understand who plays what role in the running of your country? In this video, I'll be telling you who you'll vote for and why their position matters. Welcome to the fifth part of this special edition series where I'm addressing the people who are eligible to vote. My name is Susan Wanjiko. I'm the founder of Wanjikuseyeke, and here I discuss the relationship between economic development and governance so that you can understand, engage, and influence the matters that affect you and I. Welcome to Wanjikuseyeke. So I know we hear the terms MPs, MCAs, governors, senators, etc. All these guys are people you'll be voting for come the general elections. But I know there are many people who also have no idea who does what and what their role is in the grand scheme of things when it comes to running Kenya. But first of all, before I even tell you about the roles of all these people, let me make it clear once again what governance is. Governance is simply how a country is run and the systems put in place to make a country run and function properly. And by this, I mean, how are our resources being used? Is the government addressing the needs of the people? Are the rights and freedoms of people being respected, protected, and being fulfilled? And are economic opportunities and activities being promoted, or are they under threat? Then another thing is there law and order and security, etc. And this governance is done by the people who are in government. But two important things to remember is that a government consists of two components. The first component is the public servants, and these are people hired into government, but they are not politicians. Then secondly, we have politicians who are elected into government, and they're the ones who are my focus of today. So please note, politics and governance are not the same. I know they're sometimes used interchangeably, but politics can have an influence on how a government is run. Remember that one of the many definitions of politics is that politics is a battle to either get into government and or to influence government affairs, for example, through a party like ODM or Jubilee. And that's why politics is dirty, because people are competing for power to command and control resources of a country, to have influence over the people in a country, and to control what information you have or don't have, which I discussed in my previous video. But let me also give you a background before I explain who plays what role, and also to give you an understanding of why Kenya has the current structure of government that it does. Now, in Kenya, we have two levels of government: the national government and the county government. So Kenya is segmented into counties. Then within the counties, we have wards and we have constituencies. So one would ask, why do we have two levels of government, county and national? First, it's important to note that this isn't the first time that Kenya is having a government with two levels. The first time we had a government with two levels was during Jomo Kenyatta's time, right after independence, where we had regional governments and the national government. And this is what was called the Majimbo system. Now, apparently, before the British colonizers gave Kenya its independence, they did it on the condition that we have to have a new constitution at independence, so that the new government, consisting of the elite and the dominating tribes, which was the Kikuyu and the Luo, wouldn't discriminate against the minority tribes at that time, and also wouldn't discriminate against the Europeans who had decided to settle in Kenya. So the main objective of this new constitution at independence was to share power and to tame the power of the president when it comes to making laws and in the management of Kenya's resources. Number two, they also wanted to separate the powers between the executing arm of government, and the lawmaking arm of government. I'll expound on this in part 2. Then 3, to secure and protect the human rights of Kenyans, and also to protect the land and the property of the European settlers, the minority groups, and overall for all Kenyans. However, as soon as Kenya gained independence, Jomo Kenyatta reversed all this. Like, the first thing he changed was the system of government from a parliamentary one to a presidential one. And without going into much detail, the difference between presidential and a parliamentary system of government is that the presidential one reduces the president's answerability to parliament. Like, he doesn't have to keep justifying his actions and decisions, and it also makes it a bit more difficult to remove him from power, like if he misbehaves. And this is also because in a parliamentary system, the head of the government and the head of state are not the same person. Like in the UK, the Queen is the head of state, but Boris Johnson, before he had to resign, was the head of government. But in the presidential system like Kenya, the president is both the head of state and the head of government. So then, after that, Jomo Kenyatta abolished these regional governments and made sure that he had almost unlimited powers. And Moi also followed in the same footsteps. So they basically made it impossible to hold them accountable when they were president. Then another thing that they really liked doing was to just dismantle the constitution or change the constitution however way they wanted, so that their actions could be backed by the constitution. Basically, in short, it's making what is illegal become legal. Like Jomo Kenyatta manipulated the constitution 16 times in 15 years, and Moi changed the constitution 14 times in 24 years when he was in power. So for example, they changed the constitution to ensure that all government officers remained in office for as long as the president said so. Then another thing is the president had the power to appoint all members of the electoral commission, so election results could be manipulated in their favor. And then they also removed the security of the offices of the judges of the High Court and the Court of Appeal. So like Moi could fire a judge if they made a judgment that the president didn't approve of. So essentially they just politicized the judiciary, the election systems, the police, and the public service. So if you wanted to keep your job, you better be on the president's side no matter what. And that's why during the times of Jomo Kenyatta and Moi, there were many political assassinations for anyone who tried to challenge their governments, yet no one was ever convicted, barely. If anyone was convicted, they were a scapegoat. And then generally there was a lot of fear those days that you couldn't even imagine a president could die, yet all of us will die one day. Anyway, they also made sure that the 6 regional governments couldn't get money from other independent sources, and because of that, they had to rely on the central government for money. So getting resources from the central government was also politicized. Like if a politician from a certain region didn't offer support to the president's actions or decisions, or they criticized the president, you'd find that the president would deny resources to the regions affiliated to those politicians, which is one of the reasons for the differences in the levels of development and inequality across Kenya. And then aside from appointing their family and friends into different government positions, who are also mainly from their tribes, these 2 governments and their associates really fueled ethnic divisions, sponsored violence against other tribes in certain regions, which ultimately led to people losing their land and being displaced from their ancestral land. And as a consequence, obviously, poverty. So all this has contributed to the poverty that we have against other tribes. I know some of you look at Nairobi and Vasha and think that the whole of Kenya is like that, but tembea Kenya and you'll be surprised. So So the government of Jomo Kenyatta and Moi set the tone of Kenya's politics of today. It's a system called a spoiled system or political patronage. And this is where after a political party wins an election, they give government jobs to its supporters, friends, and family. And just as an example, if the president gives me a position of a minister as a favor, what do you think are the odds that when he tells me to give all the tenders in my ministry to his family, that I will refuse? The chances are very low because I know I could lose my job. Which is why you find that people in government have no incentive or reason to be responsible or to even stand up for what is right, because if they do, they lose their position that was given to them as a favor. And in this world, the reality is that we are not dealing with angels. Most people will look out for their own interests first before they think of the interests of the country. So that's why the Kenyan situation feels like a hopeless situation, because now we have institutional corruption, incompetency in government because people are employed based on friendship and support and not out of merit or qualifications. Then maintain this system through fear, coercion, threats, intimidation, and violence, and reward unquestionable obedience and sycophancy. But let's go a little bit deeper into these issues of tribalism. So in the 1800s, the European powers discovered that Africa had resources that had not been exploited yet. And because of their greed, and they were competing for resources amongst themselves, they called a meeting in Berlin, and this is the famous Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. And these European powers were France, Britain, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, etc. And this meeting had one main objective, which was to divide Africa and draw the boundaries which make the African countries of today. So they wanted to decide which European power was taking what, so that there'd be no conflict amongst them. And yeah, everyone to stick to their lane. And just for your information, Kenya didn't have the boundaries it has today not until 1926. And these decisions were made without the involvement of Africans. And as expected, and the immediate result is that they ended up bundling up people who were extremely different from each other, and then they separated people who were more similar to each other. So they didn't consider the different identities, cultures, language, and different economic, political, and social ideologies of the different communities that already existed in Africa. So this is one of the reasons for the extreme diversity the extreme diversity that we have in Kenya. Plus it gives a background to some of the worst ethnic conflicts that have happened in Africa, like the genocide in Rwanda. And one reason for this is because our differences now as tribes become politicized and are used as a political weapon. So our political leaders incite us against each other to achieve their agenda, and they tell you that you're not getting resources because the people from the other tribe are being given more resources. And sadly, sometimes it's true. So back to the modern day, we are trying to undo and manage the consequences of things that happened nearly 40 to 100 years ago. So, who will you vote for?